Hey, welcome back to Chew the Bible. It's your good friend A.A. Ron. We are now in Ruth chapter 4, reading out of the KJV. Man, it's wild. I did some deliveries and I did one for Popeyes. And the guy, in his broken English, he said, "I have something for you. It's free." And he comes back with a big old bag of 6 fried chicken breasts, hot and everything. And at first I was like, what's wrong with these chicken breasts? And I was like, he must know ain't nobody gonna eat these chicken breasts. They're gonna end up tossing them out at the end of the night, probably. I was listening to this podcast yesterday. Well, I guess that would have been on Monday. One of our favorite podcasts to listen to. My brother and I would listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Shout out to him. And they were talking about how they, at the end of his show, sometimes he does this thing called If You Haven't Heard. And it's just these latest news. He'll pick like 3 headlines or latest news stories. And they brought up chicken thighs. How the cost of chicken thighs is going up because people preferred the thighs over the breasts. The breasts. The white, people like the dark meat more than they like the white meat. Well, what do you know? The tables have turned. Finally a W for the dark meat. Anyway, I'm just being silly, y'all. So, anyway, I've been put on, my former wife is the one that put me on to chicken thighs. She would always say, the thighs are juicier and more flavorful. And now as an adult, 38-year-old man, I definitely like dark meat over white meat. Give me the thighs and the legs all day. Breasts, they take, you gotta, the chicken, the breasts that he gave me were actually good, but even then I was like, once you get to the heart of the meat, it's tougher. It's not as tender as thighs are. You really, in order for a breast to be good, you really gotta, what is that called? You have to brine the chicken. Any chicken in general, you gotta brine it. Put in some salt water for several hours, and that way I don't know all the science behind it, but it tenderizes the meat and gets the flavor. The flavor penetrates all the way through every fiber of that meat. Anyway, enough chicken talk. But it's just funny because I literally was listening to a podcast on Monday about breast versus thighs. And then boom, this dude gives me 6 breasts. And I was telling my brother just how we get a lot of like premonition, prophetic visions before stuff happens. Like sometimes it's 30 minutes prior, sometimes it's a day prior, sometimes it's a couple days. And it's not always like biblical stuff. It's just like clues. And I was telling him, sometimes I really feel like God tells us everything that we need to know for tomorrow and the next day. Today, but most of us don't pay attention. There are all these little signs around us of things that we should be paying attention to because we're technically eternal beings. And anyway, that's a whole deeper theological and philosophical conversation that I'm not ready to have right now. So, all right, we're in Ruth chapter 4. We're reading more about Boaz, and in chapter 3, it talked about, Ruth basically proposes to Boaz, like, hey, will you marry me and take care of me and my mother-in-law? And I did some research and saw that Boaz was 80 years old. They believe, according to Jewish tradition, it doesn't say it specifically in scripture, but it's believed that he was born. I was looking something, I think it said they believe he was born in 1283 BC. Yeah. And he was 80 years old when he married Ruth. And Ruth was, they believed, 40. And I was just thinking to myself, you mean to tell me this man didn't sleep, have no relations or sleep with any other women his entire life? He just lived like a bachelor. He didn't have no sex with nobody. Sometimes I just wish the Bible would give more details on these people. Like, what in the world was Boaz doing for 80 years of his life? And then all of a sudden he decides, oh, now I'll get married. Like, what with him? What was in it for him? Did he marry her so she could be his caregiver as, he transitioned on to glory to the upper room? That's the main reason why a lot of these dudes finally get married, is because they're looking for a CNA, a registered nurse, a certified nurse assistant, somebody give them sponge baths and, pick them up when they fall down the stairs and know what to do if they stroke out or go into a diabetic coma, stuff like that. Anyway, there's so much more I could say, but let's just read. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho! Interesting choice of words there. Such a one, turn aside, sit down here, and he turned aside. That's H-O, not H-O-E. Just want to clarify. Ho! Such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down, and he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that is, come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. All right, the story is starting to come together a little bit more. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, Buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. Basically, I'm not next in line to redeem it. One of y'all, technically, has the rights to it. Verse 5, Then said Boaz, What day thou buyest the field of the land of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. Pause. I'm going to go grab my Bible, because I'm sure Tony has some notes about this. A little card fell. Oh, so I gotta be careful with it. So, my camera. Yeah. All right, we'll come back to that. Now, this was the manner in former time. Let me go back. Verse 6. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. We've talked about this with Joshua, when God told Joshua to take off his sandal as they were crossing into the promised land. He said sandal, singular. And then we talked about with Moses, with the burning bush, I believe. Was it Moses? Was it Abraham or Moses? Who encountered the burning bush? Why am I blanking out? I believe it was Moses. Oh, well, I think it was Moses. I ain't gonna go look that up. But, yeah, I think it was Moses, the burning bush. And he told him to take off his sandals, plural. Sandals. For you standing on holy ground. There was and it's significant whether it says sandals or sandal, because with sandal, it was like when Joshua took off that sandal, it was signifying. I've heard people say, particularly Robert Madu, on his sermon, saying that was a signifier that God was transacting business with Joshua, as here you go. We're doing a business deal. I'm giving you basically the keys to the kingdom here on earth, like the promised land. Anyway, like getting the keys to your new house. Now, this was the manner in former time. Y'all go read it on your own. Come to your own, reflections on this stuff. One of the most challenging things about doing this podcast is sometimes people, like when you start reading stuff and sharing your interpretations of scripture, you'll start getting all these comments. It hasn't gotten that bad yet on YouTube, but I do get some people that come at you with, and it don't even be like in a respectful manner for respectful discourse. It's like whatever beef they got going on with the entire church and all Christians, or and then they feel like they need to come at you like that. And then of course you got your know-it-alls that were that kid in school that had to always be like, well, actually, this is what it really means. Instead of just being like, well, the way I interpret that scripture, or this is what I've learned, or saying, I don't know, sharing in a nicer way. There's a nicer way to say stuff to people. Or if you have a correction for them, or say, have you thought about this interpretation? Blah, blah, blah. Or have you read this commentary? And give me actual sources that I could go to help me grow. Not when you come at people a certain way, it makes me not even want to, like, I don't know. If I was a non-Christian and somebody came at me this way some of y'all be coming at folks, it would make me not even want to read the Bible or want to have anything to do with Christianity. But anyway, let me keep going. Now this, verse 7. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. Do we want to read that in Amplify? Yeah, let's do that in Amplify, verse 7. Later. I don't that now. Amplified. Now, formerly in Israel, this was the custom concerning redeeming and exchanging property. To confirm a transaction, a man pulled off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the way of confirming and attesting in Israel. There you go. There's also a little note here on verse 6. The excuse given was probably made up on the spot by this relative redeemer to avoid the obligation of marrying Ruth and raising a son in her deceased husband's name. He may very well not have wanted to raise a son under such circumstances or to be married to a Moabite woman. Ooh. Because it said, the closest relative redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself because by marrying a Moabitess, I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, purchase yourself because I cannot redeem it. It didn't say anything specifically about Ruth having a child, but it could be assumed, I guess, that she did have at least one child. And this is interesting. Talking about jeopardizing his own inheritance. This reminds me of the story of, once again, Onan in Genesis 38. Y'all can go read that on your own. All right, verse 7. Back in the KJV. This is why I like the Amplified so much. I really just want to just read the Amplified going forward, but partially for copyright reasons and for just because I know there's a lot of people out there who prefer the KJV, and it is the closest direct translation. That's one of the reasons why I read so much out of it. But there are benefits to reading it in the KJV first, and then pick a translation. Once again, I prefer Amplified, or NOT. But all right, verse 8. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe, and Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Kilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Remember Kilion and Mahlon? They were the husbands of, well, one of them was a husband of Ruth, and the other was the husband of Ruth's sister-in-law, or Naomi's sons. They were Naomi's sons. All right, so Boaz bought all that belonged to them, or to Elimelech, and I guess Elimelech was a descendant of, or an ancestor of Naomi. But a man had, I guess, buy the land. She wasn't allowed to buy the property herself. Interesting. So she had to have a kinsman redeemer purchase it. Back then, yeah, women had like zero rights. It still amazes me that women couldn't even get credit cards. Well, the whole credit system wasn't invented till like the 50s, I think, or something like that. Anyway, yeah, women couldn't get credit cards like the 70s, something like that, or buy things without their husband, like major purchases, all that kind of stuff. Women's rights in general, that's why we had a whole women's rights movement, wasn't even a thing till like the 70s, 60s, 70s, all that. All right, let's keep going. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah. Why? those two particular ladies. Why are we talking about them? Which two did build TWO, not TOO? Which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem, and let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Why, they brought up the story of Tamar, which is in Genesis 38. I'm going to read that again. And let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. This man was 80 years old, and he didn't need no Viagra or no Hims or no blue pill. It was still working at 80 years old. And her plumbing and pipes was still working as well at 40. Once again, these ages are all alleged. These people, we don't know, the Bible doesn't clearly tell us the ages of Ruth and Naomi, but it's Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. But it's believed that, yeah, Ruth was about 40, Boaz was about 80. And I wouldn't be surprised if Naomi was at least in her 60s. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, and that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Wow. It's amazing how David's great. So what would that be? Ruth would be David's great grandmother. Yeah, so father of Jesse. So, let's do this again. Obed is the father of Jesse. And then Jesse is the father of David. So Ruth would be like his great grandmother 3 times. So I'm like, my brain is just not. It's just, I was trying to do the math there, but it's like, nah, bruh. Just keep moving, keep reading. Verse 18. Now these are the generations of Pharez. I would have to write it on paper and then do it, because yeah, I ain't doing all that though. All right, now these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begat Hezron, and Hezron begat Ram, and Ram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon, however you want to say that. It's funny, my pops growing up, he would call salmon. Sometimes he would call it Simon, and then sometimes he would call it salmon, but he would never say salmon. The English language, the King's English, is jacked up anyway, so I don't really like to make fun of people who say mispronounce English words anyway, because the whole language is a joke to begin with. All right, begat, because if you look at some of our words, it's like, okay, I can't think of one right now, but some of them, it's like, okay, why is it spelled this way and sound this way? And salmon, like knock, Knock is how you spell it. No and no are the same, like same pronunciation, but spelled differently. No, I don't want you. No, I don't want that food versus to know somebody. Know versus no. Like, English language is a joke. And Salmon begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed. And Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. All right, I'm tripping because, yeah, that's more generations than I thought. Hold on a second. Boaz, okay. So here, yeah, let's do this. Salmon begot Boaz. Okay. Boaz begat Obed. So that will be 1, 2, 3. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, Boaz was David's great one. I'm not overthinking this. If I'm David and I say Jesse is my daddy and Obed will be my grandpa and Boaz would be my great grandpa, which would make Ruth my great grandmother. Yeah, I think I did that right. Ruth was David's great grandmother. Interesting. And they're all tied going back to, and then they all tied back to Pharez, which was the son of Tamar from Genesis 38. I encourage y'all to go read Genesis 38. All right, let me read these Tony notes. What you got for me, Mr. Tony? I was already on it. Let's see here. Yeah, that's the last chapter of Ruth. I got a bunch of notes written here. All right, what we got here. Boaz went to the gate of the town where business and civic activities were conducted. Boaz invited the men to sit down with him and asked 10 of the town's elders to join them. These men would serve as witnesses of the legal proceedings that were about to transpire. So there was 12 men total. If you think about that, it goes at number 12. So you got Boaz, and then you have the man that's the kinsman, that's technically the rightful next in line owner, has the next rights to that property. It'd almost be like in modern day times if you had a deed of trust and or you didn't have, on the deed, your great grandfather didn't put anybody as like transfer on death, TOD. So they had to find the next of kin for him if he didn't have a trust or anything, and then go to them in probate court. Like with my aunt, she went into probate, and then had to have my mom and my aunt Ellen like sign these quick claim deeds, I believe, to let go of their rights to that property. Back then, women would not have been able to do this. It would have had to been my grandpa's son had passed away, so it would have had to have been like his kinsman redeemer would have been like one of his brothers. One of my uncles who I've never met. One of my grandpa's uncles. Apparently I got a bunch of cousins in California, or uncles in California I've never met. Anyway, it would have had to been to one of them, and they would have had rights to marry my grandmother. Interesting. Wow, the world is very interesting. All right. Fascinating. Boaz went to the gate. So it's 12 in them total. Boaz went to the gate of the town where business and civic activities were conducted. Boaz invited the man to sit down with him and asked 10 of the town's elders to join them. These men would serve as witnesses of the legal proceedings that were about to transpire. Since he was the closest relation, the unnamed man had first rights to buy Naomi's land. When he jumped at the chance, Boaz noted that if the guy redeemed the land, he would also be redeeming the widow Ruth for a wife to perpetuate the deceased man's name on his property. That meant that with the economic acquisition came a social acquisition. Yeah, you have to marry her, have a child, so then that child can take over that property. At that time in Israel, you couldn't sign some legal documents and have them notarized, so a legally binding transaction of this nature was ratified by the custom of a man giving his sandal to another party with whom he was doing business. Yeah, they didn't have LegalZoom, or they didn't have, quick claim deeds and deeds of trust and recorders of deeds, and what do we have now? DocuSign, they have all that. Notaries. Boaz acquired Ruth and the property out of concern for others, to perpetuate the deceased man's name on his property so that his name would not disappear among his relatives. This sacrifice brings to mind this New Testament principle: whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life because of me will find it. Matthew 16:25. Often blessings follow when we lay down our priorities for the sake of God's kingdom. Reminds me of that song by, I can't think of his name. I keep blanking on his name, but it's that I give myself away so you can use me. My life is not my own. To you I belong. I give myself to you. I can't think of the old dude's name. He also has that song, When You Walk Into the Room. Man, I'll look it up all of a sudden now. Library, playlist, Me and Jesus. William McDowell, there you go, that dude. William McDowell. He has some great songs. That's why marriage is the ultimate example of two people laying their lives down for each other. But the man, some people don't like it, but even I wrestle with this. The man is called to make an even greater sacrifice than the woman. Because they're supposed to be the weaker vessel, and anyway. It's all supposed to be a reflection of the church, our relationship with one another, and how Jesus is our groom, and the church is the bride. The bride is technically the weaker vessel. Jesus is the stronger vessel. Anyway, some deep theological stuff. All right, Rachel and Leah gave birth. Once again, this is a Tony Evans study notes. Rachel and Leah gave birth to many of the fathers of the tribes of Israel. Excuse me. Little did they know how famous Boaz would become, or how great his offspring would be. Ruth and Boaz's son. Let me go back to verse 11. All the people who were at the city gate, including the elders, said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. yeah, because the 12 tribes of Israel came out of Rachel and Leah. Yeah, I was wondering why in the KJV, they spell it with PH, but I always read it as Perez, Perez. Make your house become like the house of Perez, the son Tamar bore to Judah. It always amazed me how much children back then were considered such a blessing. Like, they wouldn't even, as far as I know, they would not even, that was other cultures that were doing that. Neighboring cities and people like the Moabites, these other nations, they were the ones that were into all that child sacrifice and abortions even back then. But abortion was not a thing amongst the children of Israel. They would never even think to do that. Children were such a blessing. Little did they know how famous Boaz would become or how great his offspring would be. Ruth and Boaz's son, you can go see Matthew 1:5-17, because it gives you the breakdown of his family tree. And they give you one here in verse 18. Ruth and Boaz's son Obed would be grandfather to David. Yeah, because Ruth and Boaz were David's great-grandparents, and Obed was their grandfather. The great king of Israel. The ancient Israelites to whom the author was writing knew of this amazing heritage. What they didn't know was that there was an even greater descendant to come from this bloodline. The kingly line of David will ultimately lead to the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who would be born in his ancestral home, Bethlehem, through Boaz. Though Boaz and Ruth were unaware of it, their lives and decisions were part of God's kingdom program. By submitting yourself to the Lord's agenda, you open yourself to his sovereign purposes, not only for your own benefit, but also potentially for the benefit of generations after you. Next, we'll be reading out of 1 Samuel. Stay tuned. Toodaloo.